With the United States, our closest ally, progressive realism means strengthening our friendship with both sides of the aisle, joining them to defend Israel from Iranian attack. And with the Global South, progressive realism means working together, no more lectures, showing respect, renewing partnerships and new agreements like those that I've launched in India, in Indonesia, in South Africa and Nigeria. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are simply right when they say that Europe needs to do more to defend its own continent. We have to accept that there is no going back. We must stop the 1990s clouding our vision. The post-Cold War peace is well and truly over. This is a changed strategic environment. The number of conflicts higher than at any time since 1945. The spectre of famine from Gaza to Sudan, and the most refugees and displaced people on record. I'm occasionally asked on my travels here and of course on the doorstep around the country, when will the Kremlin threat, this upheaval that we're experiencing, end? When will things get back to normal? My answer is that they will not. Europe's future security is on a knife edge. Bevin warned in 1948 that we would only preserve peace by mobilizing such force, and I quote, as we will create confidence and energy on the one side and inspire respect and caution on the other. And this is exactly what we need now. That's why our foreign policy has had to change. Inspired by Bevin, I call our new approach progressive realism, taking the world as it is, not as we would wish it to be, advancing progressive ends by realist means. Through a storm of crises, we've been putting this into practice. In Europe, progressive realism means working with our European neighbours rather than bickering and isolating ourselves from them. New defence and migration agreements with Germany, an ambitious UK-France summit in the works, a new era in relations with Ireland, a new foreign policy dialogue with the European Union, the first steps towards a UK-EU security pact. With the United States, our closest ally, progressive realism means strengthening our friendship with both sides of the aisle, joining them to defend Israel from Iranian attacks. Together with Australia, further progressing the AUKUS partnership and making a breakthrough for UK defence companies thanks to the ITAR changes. Against Russia, progressive realism means not allowing Putin's mafia state to act with impunity and showing the world our resolve to stand by Kyiv until they prevail, guaranteeing $3 billion a year in military aid for as long as it takes, and unlocking a new funding backed by frozen Russian assets, as well as stepping up action with allies on Kremlin disinformation and making it my personal mission to choke off Russian revenues through our sanctions, imposing the most of any country against Russian shadow fleet and driving forward our campaign against kleptocracy. In the face of conflicts in the Middle East and beyond, progressive realism means standing firm against terrorism and behind international law, doubling our aid for Sudan, helping hundreds of Brits leave Lebanon, restoring funding for UNRWA, standing up for international courts, taking tough decisions on export licenses, but not flinching from defending Israel against an Iranian regime that wants to destroy it, while at the same time working for that ceasefire in Gaza so we can surge in the aid, bring all the hostages home, and advance a two-state solution. And when it comes to China, progressive realism means consistency, not oscillation, as I set out when I was visiting Beijing, and Rachel Reeves is continuing this week. Pragmatic engagement to cooperate with China where we can, such as on trade, climate, global health, or AI regulation, but also very robust dialogue and challenge where there are clear threats. Sanctioning Chinese firms who supply technologies to support Putin's war, working for the release of Jimmy Lai, calling for an end to human rights abuses in Xinjiang, an end to cyber attacks on the UK, and an end to sanctions on our parliamentarians. And on the climate and nature crisis, progressive realism sees global action as fundamental to our energy independence and national security. We've launched the Global Clean Power Alliance, bringing 12 countries on board in its first mission to turbocharge the rollout of clean energy and drive green jobs and investment at home. And with the Global South, progressive realism means working together, no more lectures, showing respect, renewing partnerships and new agreements like those that I've launched in India, in Indonesia, in South Africa and Nigeria. That's all just in the last 6 months. This is just the beginning, and I'm determined for my tenure to be more than the day-to-day crisis management kind of foreign secretary. We and our allies must relearn the Cold War manual, long-term thinking, not short-termism, consistent deterrence, not constant distraction, adapting as emerging technology reshapes the strategic environment, securing strategic stability in an unstable world. Our opponents are coordinating ever more closely, with Iranian drones fired on Ukrainian cities and North Korean troops now fighting against Ukraine. We too need a whole new level of global engagement with our closest allies in the United States, Europe, and the Five Eyes, our strategic partners in Japan and South Korea, and with all those committed to the principles of the UN Charter. That's why we will engage with China. We have to challenge them, not to throw their lot in with Putin. And second, to be taken seriously by our opponents and allies alike, we must put our money where our mouth is. That starts by facing the facts. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are simply right when they say that Europe needs to do more to defend its own continent. It's myopia to pretend otherwise with Russia on the march. So this government will lay out a clear pathway to reaching 2.5% of our GDP on defence. A figure, lest we forget, that the last Labour government met and was never met by the Tories since David Cameron's cuts. And with John Healey, we will lead and we will change to convince all of our NATO allies that rising defence spending is a strategic necessity. And third, we must forge closer partnerships with the Global South. Because the world is larger than the North Atlantic and the Mediterranean. We cannot divorce the Euro-Atlantic from the Indo-Pacific, and the Kremlin has spread its tentacles across the world, spewing out disinformation on every continent, dispatching mercenaries to Africa and seeking closer relations within the BRICS formation. A grim vision of unending competition is not compelling to the vast majority of states. We must avoid repeating the mistake of the early Cold War period, where the West lost ground to the so-called Third World. From Jakarta to Kampala, the non-aligned movement was the result. And today, many of those same states are structuring their foreign policy to avoid harm from US competition. To shape 2035, we must offer a new vision of partnership, which approaches those countries as equals, working with pioneers like Mia Mottley to reform the global financial system, more climate finance, delivered faster and with greater impact, is not a luxury, but a geopolitical necessity. Failing to deliver means failing the global south, and that only advantages Vladimir Putin.